Hi, I'm Simon Doull and welcome to Kiwi Bred, brought to you this week by the stunning Westbury Stud. First up, it's a look at their new stallion, Redwood, and Russell Warwick sits down with me and explains why they bought the Group 1 winning son of High Chaparral.
I think the point that we need middle distance and staying horses here has been well proven, and for a little while there we all went away from that. We went away to sprint a mile of stallions, and we felt that that's what we needed to do. And really the Australians and the rest of the world want to come to New Zealand to buy our staying horses, so we needed a balance of staying, milers, middle distance in our stallion lineup to be able to offer breeders all sorts of stallions, and having a Group 1 winning son of High Chaparral was really high on the list.
A number of owners involved in it. Tell us how that comes about and what the benefits to them are.
Well, syndication offers two primary opportunities. One, to spread the cost of the horse when you're purchasing them, and so therefore the stud is not having to put all the money up. And the other thing, more importantly, is the continuity of getting mares to the horse for the first 4 or 5 years, that it doesn't rely solely on the stud, if they owned 100% of the horse, to have to support the horse with every mare that they've got. So there's two ways of looking at it, but most importantly probably the second one, to make sure that for the next 3 or 4 years he's going to have 100, 120 mares going to him, and give him every opportunity once the runners come out on the track that he's going to have enough to make him a commercial opportunity at stud. What
appeals to breeders about him?
Oh, look, we know the family works in this part of the world. We know that they're commercial, the buyers will pay plenty of money for them, and they suit the New Zealand broodmare pool. And, you know, he's a Group 1 winner of 2.3 million US, I think it's 17 lifetime starts. He was in he's 16 of them were in black type, and he ran in races like the Shima Classic in Dubai, he ran in the Hong Kong Vase, and ran very creditably. So to have him here and owned for New Zealand's another important factor as well, because he's not going to shuttle. There's no fear that breeders that support him in his first few years are not going to have the horse to come back to in years 3, 4 or 5. And even with his sire, High Chaparral, did such a great job here, and then only to be lost to New Zealand and go to Australia. So by having the surety of having that horse owned in New Zealand, we know we have got some longevity with him.
In his racing career, he was up against some fairly outstanding horses himself. What attributes did he have on the racetrack?
Look, he was very typical of the breed, Simon, in that he won his only race at 2 over 1,600 metres. He came out as a 3-year-old and he won a listed race over 9 furlongs, or the equivalent of 1,800 metres. But we really saw the horse shine when he got to 4 years of age. And he was narrowly beaten by Glass Harmonium over 2,000 metres, fresh up in his 4-year-old campaign. And we've seen Glass Harmonium come to the Southern Hemisphere and win a McKinnon Stakes last year. But then he raced against horses like Managar and My Kingdom of Fife, and horses that we can really relate to in the Southern Hemisphere that have come down here and been very good performers at Group 1 level. So no doubting his ability. Time form rated him well above Managar and My Kingdom of Fife throughout his career. And I think one of the testaments to his real temperament was that we saw how much travelling he did. He raced in England, he raced in France. He then got on a plane and went to Canada, won a Group 1 race, jumped on a plane, flew back to England, had 2.5 weeks at home and flew back to Canada and got beaten a half head in a Group 1 race. And then just for good measure and add to the air points, he travelled to Hong Kong for the Vase and ran second to Mastery in the Hong Kong Vase ahead of Americain. So absolute world-class performer, and a horse that really took travelling and all those complications that go with travelling in his stride.
He looked very relaxed in the parade yard. The staff found him easy to handle?
Yeah, look, he doesn't really know what's ahead of him yet. 1 September, when the service barn door opens, it might be a different story, but at this stage he's a racehorse in spelling mode, getting fed well and groomed well and looked after really well. And the transition from racehorse to stallion often takes 12 months, 2 years before the stallions really start to build up and look masculine like some of the other horses. and I think in 12 months' time you're going to see a particularly nice animal. I think one of the things that strikes you straight away when you first see him, that he just oozes quality, and he's got lovely scope about him, and I think a lot of breeders will recognise that in the horse and understand that he's very typical of what High Chaparral's left, and the So You Thinks and those sort of horses bear the very similar resemblance to him.
Apart from the group of owners, how much other interest have you had so far?
At this stage, he's well on target to probably cover 120 mares with shareholders and outside nominations. And, you know, amongst those shareholders, the stud obviously owns a good shareholding in the horse, and we'll support him with 20-25 mares of ours. So he won't lack for opportunities, and I have every confidence with the pedigree and the performance that he had on the racetrack that he can really measure up.
$12,500 the service fee. How do you come about that?
Look, you know, I think in some cases, being a Group 1 winning son of High Chaparral, there may have been cases that you could argue to stand him higher than that. I think he's really well placed in the market, and, you know, there's very few Group 1 winning horses with the pedigree that he's got can stand for that fee, and will hopefully have the appeal to the buying bench when they first step out.
Exciting times ahead for Westbury Stud, with plenty to like about Redwood. Now it's time to catch up with equine vet Tim Pearce, courtesy of International Animal Health Products.
Tim, today we're talking about the care around a mare and foal before and after foaling. Why is it so important, or such a critical point in time for the mare?
Mares foal in a very, very short time frame. It's often quite an explosive event. When they start foaling, there's often only about half an hour for them to get the foal out. If there's problems in that time, then there's often a dead foal if it's not out in that time frame, or a mare that's compromised. Different stud managers would vary in their experience and where they'd like to have a vet intervene. The average mare is going to be, you know, the next day to assess the mare, and just basically you have many of the mares, when they have the foal, they can get traumatised through the birth canal. There can often be small tears and, you know, vaginal tears and things like that need tidying up. Most good stud managers will be able to assess that, and they know when that needs to be looked at. Also, occasionally, you know, the mare won't clean properly, so the membranes aren't expelled at the time of foaling, or within a short time period after foaling. If there's any doubt about that, the mare really needs to be looked at by a veterinarian and attended to.
We looked at some placentas today, or after birth. What sorts of things are the vet looking at, or the stud managers looking at when they're assessing those? Completeness,
basically. If there's anything that's torn and has been retained by the mare and is still in the uterus after the mare's foaled, it's potentially a source of infection for mares. And if they remain inside the uterus for a couple of days undetected, you know, they can get very, very sick, and it's very important to check that.
If we talk about the foal after foaling, what sorts of things are we needing to be aware of? What do we need to see from the foal in those first few hours?
Basically, we have some rules of thumb, and generally once a mare starts foaling, we think 30 minutes and the foal should be out. Most foals, when they are on the ground and they've been born, we would expect them to be on their feet within an hour and suckling within 2 hours. In the foaling process, the placenta will come out and the umbilicus will rupture. Sometimes they're clamped, and that blood supply to the foal is finished, basically. Now, through that area of the umbilicus with the belly button, there is a potential for contamination and for bugs to get in there, and that's an extremely important thing on a good stud, to make sure it's clean. Most studs will spray it with an antibiotic spray or dip it with iodine, and just make sure everything's clean around it.
And why is it so critical that foals get that first lot of milk from the mare?
It has colostrum in it. Colostrum has a lot of antibodies which are only absorbed into the foal in that first few hours after birth. Good ways of measuring it before they get it and after. Refractometers are used frequently on studs to measure the density and the levels. It gives a guide to the levels of antibodies in the milk. Some milk is run for a long time out of mares before they foal, and the colostrum quality can drop. So good studs will often have a store of good colostrum on hand in a freezer where that is a problem, and they may supplement a foal shortly after birth. Just going on from that, much of the stuff we do with many of our foals, particularly the ones that are insured, or ones that we think have been compromised, will often use a blood test to assess how much antibody's been absorbed. We can do that through the lab, or there are different ways of measuring that at the IgG level. And insurance companies actually require a minimum if they're going to accept insurance on those foals, so it's quite an important process. Timing in early life is critical, and a lot of these little babies, that might only be a couple of hours between them being able to sustain life and get onto the teat and get suckling. There might be other small problems they have, such as passing them meconium and things like that, that really you only have a small time frame to deal with, and they run out of energy, and next thing you've got a major crisis. So yeah, I think dealing with them early and dealing with them swiftly is extremely important.